Well, this year I came up with an even better idea.
At the beginning of part 1, I showed you a bunch of mistakes that people make. This mistake right here is pretty obvious, but some of the others may not be. So I'm going to go through a few of those videos I showed and talk about what went wrong with each one of them. So what went wrong here? Well, the first thing we see is this angled back cut. The second thing we see is that the notch was too deep. They went almost 2/3 of the way through the tree with the notch, and then they did an angled back cut. But the biggest problem is that they cut all the way through right here, and they released the tree. But they only released it on one side. If you look in that circle, that's been cut all the way through. But over here you see hinge wood. And that hinge wood hung on, so that if you're looking from this direction behind the tree, on the left side there's hinge wood. On the right side it's completely released, so that caused the tree to twist around in a circle. You can see the gentleman here with his hands on his head. These guys just cannot believe the tree went in that direction. But if we look very carefully at it, we can see what went wrong here. Just look at how extreme that angled back cut is. These guys were trying really hard to not have the tree fall back against the house. Instead, by cutting through too far and creating that angled back cut, they caused the butt of the tree to slide forward. With that knowledge, if we go back and look at the video of the tree, you can see that it's sliding off the stump to the left, causing the tree to fall at a right angle to the desired direction of fall. Now here we have a guy right next to a road making his face cut. He's cut it so far through that the tree falls against the high tension power lines. And of course he's hanging onto the tree and trying to push it back the other way. If we take a look at the stump, we can easily see what went wrong. That is supposed to be a face cut. A face cut should be no more than 1/3 of the way into the tree. He's cut all the way through so that the tree released towards the road and into the power lines. These ropes are from professionals who came and helped to secure the tree. But just listen to the explanation that we hear on the video from the homeowner.
Didn't make any sense for it to fall this way. Probably was just the fact that the tree was already tilting that way to begin with.
My God! Oh my God!
Well, this is a pretty easy one to sort out. You'll notice they hadn't even got done cutting the notch yet, and they had gone most of the way through the tree, leaving only a small strand of wood. So they basically hinge cut this tree over into the house without ever even finishing the face cut. Next we have an example of somebody doing pretty much everything right. He's made a nice face cut. He's doing his back cut horizontally. Now he hears a cracking noise, he backs up, and then he gets one of the worst barber chairs I've ever seen. So what went wrong? Well, what went wrong is he hesitated. When you think a tree is going to barber chair, you need to keep on cutting through. That is the key to preventing barber chairs. Now this is a tall, straight tree with a straight grain, prone to barber chairing. It's got some lean to the left in the image there. So what he needed to do is complete his back cut. He hesitated, he let the strain on the tree take over, and it cracked up. This is why it's critical to have a super sharp chainsaw all the time. You can cut through problems like this if you're chewing through it and throwing chips and not sawdust. Now here's a guy who did just about everything right, except he had hesitation and uncertainty. By now you ought to be able to recognize that he cut too far through with the face cut. Then he did an angled back cut, but he had hardly any room to do anything. The tree wanted to lean back against him. He couldn't have put a wedge in there or done anything. He made his face cut too deep. The same thing can happen with hinge cutting. If you cut too far through and let the tree release on its own, you can have problems. Unless he was very lucky, he'll probably have some repairs to do on that chainsaw. And I know what I'm talking about. I've had plenty of mishaps on my own. In this case, I lost a fight with a big basswood tree.
That didn't go as planned.
What he should have said is, it didn't go as expected. It was a perfect plan. The plan was, do too deep a face cut, and then do a steep angled back cut to help the tree slide forward off the stump. Here's another perfectly executed plan. A steep back cut causes the tree to slide forward off the stump. The ropes can't hold it. The base of the tree slides forward, causing displacement and causing the tree to fall over backwards. Take a look at how high up above the face cut the back cut is. It's easier to see on this stump that he previously cut. That should be a distance of no more than 2 inches or so. And there's almost no hinge wood at all here. He's cut almost all the way through it. He's just made so many mistakes here. He got lucky with his first tree, but the second tree fell just like it really should after cutting through the hinge with an angled back cut. So if you want to plan to have the tree fall backwards like this, do an angled back cut and don't leave enough holding wood. It will work almost every time. So just imagine this tree is, 10 or 12 inches in diameter. And what I'm going to do is an angle cut. And I'm going to go about as far as we normally would when we hinge cut. So the idea is you want this tree to go in this direction, but if it's a bigger tree, it may fall back on you, and you can put a wedge back in here with a bigger tree. Now I've cut through far enough that I could pull that tree down right now, pretty close to it. I'm going to go just a little further. And Randy, I want you to come around here and take a picture of how far through my saw is on this. And now I'm going to do a flat cut under it. And I'm going to make this flat cut a lot further through than I did the other cut. So it is completely ready to release. And we're going to see which one of these break off. You imagine this is a big tree. And what's happening here is this tree is completely released down here. There's just a little bit of wood holding it. There's a lot more wood holding it up here. So why is it that it takes so many more cuts to do an angle cut than it does to do a flat cut? Well, first, when you do an angle cut, you're cutting down along the grain of the wood. You're not just cutting across the wood. If you do a flat cut, you're doing a cross cut. It turns out that both a handsaw and a chainsaw are more efficient at cutting across the grain than they are cutting with the grain. Since you're partially cutting with the grain, it actually takes more work for the saw to chew when you're doing an angle cut. The other thing has to do with the distance you're cutting. Let's say you have a 4-inch diameter tree. If you want to cut 3/4 of the way through that tree, it takes 3 inches of cutting to do a flat cut. But if you do an angle cut at a 45-degree angle, that's 4.2 inches. That may not seem like much, but if you were to do 100 of these 4-inch trees, you're cutting a whopping extra 10 feet of wood to do those 100 trees. That's a lot of work. It's a lot of wear and tear on the equipment, and it's a lot of wear and tear on your body. And you're doing all that extra work in order to make a more unstable hinge. It gave first up here on the top. The bottom one didn't even give. Why is that? Because here I was pulling on a lever that's angled down like this, and it broke that apart across the grain. Now Randy, come up here and show how thick that is. This is my holding wood right here. It was almost 1/3 of the tree. Here's my holding wood on the other side. Look at the difference in the amount of holding wood there. Which one broke? The angle cut. The angle cut will always be weaker and break first. I hate to do this because I like to get my trees to survive, but I'm gonna cut these the way most guys have a problem cutting them. And if you look at the video sequence I had earlier on that showed tree failures, I pointed out a lot of times it's from cutting too far. Most of your break-offs are going to come from one of two things: cutting an angle cut or cutting through the tree too far. See, I kept cutting there long after I normally would have stopped. And this is what you guys are getting. This is completely wrecked right here. You need to be stopping way back here. I'm watching for the most imperceptible tipping of that tree. Now I'm going to try to cut one correctly. And I'll use this one right here. And watch the difference. I'm going to stop a lot sooner. Okay, that tree's ready to go. Watch out, Jake. Look at the difference in those hinges.
Perfect hinge.
Look at how much shorter I stopped there. I waited until I knew the tree was ready to go over. This is a nice smooth radius here. This tree's probably going to survive. This one's going to die. So the biggest problem you guys probably have if you've gotten to where you're flat cutting, which is really going to help, is now to not cut too far through the tree. Hung up in some leaves up there. This isn't going to work.
You got it. You got it.